Yeah. So he's a personal CFO to Latino executives and entrepreneurs with over $1 million portfolios. A St. John's University graduate, and I don't know if this is true. I found this on AI. Third degree black belt. Is that true?
I'm fifth now.
Yeah.
I was supposed to
Oh,
be
okay. Oh,
going,
my apologies. All
but
right. Remind me never
I,
to cause you offense.
I've been remiss in my practicing, so I can't even say I'm a karate guy as much anymore. I practice
Well,
outside in the mornings and do roughly 20 minutes of work, but aside from that, it's I can't even get to the dojo nowadays. It's because I'm so busy with business and what have you.
well, it's a good problem to have, but yeah, still, that's extremely impressive. I mean, yeah, I can't even imagine. So, congratulations on that. Maybe you'll get
Oh,
back to
thank
it.
you.
If the economy tanks next year, you'll have maybe more time on your hands.
I'm busier when it's worse.
Oh, I bet you get a lot of nervous calls from clients, right?
Not a lot, but new clients and prospective clients
Mm,
definitely reach out to you because they've been on the fence for a while or what have you, and they want to talk to an expert or they want to talk to someone who's out there, who's in the trenches.
gotcha. Well, let's talk about Donald Trump's. This was Robbie's idea to do this topic, and I really like it. The idea is that Donald Trump has promised to reindustrialize the Rust Belt, where I'm from. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio. It was a well into a six-figure population when I grew up there. Headquarters of regional banks, factories. NCR was headquartered there. Defense Electronics Supply Corporation, Delco Moraine. Every S5 and S10 pickup truck in the world was made in Dayton or in Moraine, Ohio, just outside Dayton. And today, Dayton is a shell of what it used to be. And then that's a very typical problem. And, I would say it's a large part of the reason that Donald Trump is president of the United States, is he was able to go to places like Dayton, where he went often, and look out the window of his car and think, man, this must suck to live here. And people felt seen, and they voted for him, and so he's talking about he talked about bringing coal back. There's really apparently not much appetite for that for a variety of reasons, but he is now talking about reindustrializing the Rust Belt, and also this move with tariffs and tax cuts and deregulation, not to mention the attempt to revive the steel industry, appears to be tied in with this goal that he stated that he wants to revive, of all things, the shipbuilding industry in the United States, which has been long gone and we thought we'd never see again. So, we wanted to ask you, sort of about the pros and cons of this. I mean, Donald Trump, he says a lot of things that he doesn't seem to care much about. And then other things he cares deeply about. And, it's like, so I mean, I can immediately see, the pros and cons. When I was a kid, and I would go, and I was growing up in Dayton, I developed asthma because the air was so bad from those factories. I remember the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland catching fire, which basically inaugurated the modern environmental movement. And when in the 1980s, so many companies went out of business in Ohio and Michigan that they stopped dumping toxins into Lake Erie. Lake Erie, which had been declared biologically dead by the EPA, there weren't even microbes, came back. Now you can catch big fish there. Nature has revived. So I could see the pro. I want the jobs back. I want the banks back. I want my former neighbors to be able to afford to send their kids to college again. But I also don't know if I want an AQI of 290 every day like I used to have, and and everybody growing up with asthma, and and all the fish in Lake Erie dying again. So I don't know. I just wanted to get into it with you and see what do you think about this?
I think it's very interesting. He says a lot of things, but the truth of the matter is the devil's in the details. You're going to bring back coal, not a great idea. Will pollute even more the environment. And honestly, the thinking in my head is, what are we? back in 50, 60 years ago. I don't understand
Mm,
this mentality. I think that there are plenty of other industries that could be brought to bear in an area like Dayton and the surrounding areas where you could make just as much, if not more, money. Now, you don't have to be a rocket scientist, to have, say, whether it be call centers, whether it be AI data storage,
mhm,
things that just make sense in the here and now. We have not had steel in this country. I mean, what was the last? Pittsburgh still has one uh, thing left, one of those factories left.
U.S.
We haven't
Steel, that's the
had
last
that.
one.
Yeah, we haven't had that for the longest time, and simply because it is much cheaper to produce in other countries. You can't force an industry to bring it back here unless, what are we going to do? Are we going to pay these people slave labor wages? Because that's what you would have to do to really make it work here. All right. There would have to be some sort of industrialized zone of sorts to get away with this. But if you think about it, we're also inviting back not only environmental disasters. I mean, you talk about Lake Erie. I mean, you could talk about several areas that were declared. The whole reason why we have super funds was
mhm,
because this kept happening again and again throughout the country because there was no corporate responsibility. All right. The corporations were getting away with it. They're still getting away with it, just as not on a larger scale as they did back in the 50s and 60s, where it was known that a lot of these things could contaminate the water. It could contaminate, your foodstuffs, food supplies. And you mentioned, your asthma. I'm guessing there were plenty of other diseases as a direct result of these corporations being there. Do you really think that that won't happen again, and maybe 3 or 4 times worse because of the amount of toxins? And before we had a certain amount, let's use the pot example for argument's sake. Let's say back in the 60s and 70s, pot had a certain amount of THC in it,
mm.
right, which is the active ingredient. That's the stuff that gets you high. But can you imagine, the pot now has 3 to 7 times the amount. And now I'm just spitballing here, but you were talking about these companies which haven't been the most responsible of companies to come back in to let that damage happen. It would accelerate, I would say, fivefold, tenfold. And instead of ruining the environment in, say, 3 years, we're talking maybe one, where you're starting to see the all these adverse effects on people. And then, what are you going to do from there? Oh, I'm sorry, we knew about it, but, which was the case. Most of these companies knew, it's kind of like cigarettes. They know it was toxic.
Mhm.
They knew it caused cancer. They knew that there were plenty of adverse effects from smoking, yet they still function. And once they got you hooked, you were in there, and to the day, that is still the case. And I don't have anything against that. If that's your thing, I'm not going to tell you, don't smoke. All right. But so long as you know the risk that you run by doing so, then that's on you. So I see these companies, I see, shipbuilding, that's super interesting to me. I was like, okay, so we're going to build a shipyard here, in Dayton, for argument's sake, and
Well,
we're
it
going to
won't
bring
be in
that,
Dayton. It'll be in Baltimore, let's say,
right.
right?
Okay, let's say
Or
Baltimore for,
Norfolk.
all
Mhm.
right, where traditionally those industries were housed, if I remember correctly. And you're going to build your ships there, but how much are you going to pay these people? If we go do it somewhere else in the world, we can get it for a third of the price.
Well, I
That
think the
is
argument
still the
would be,
case.
and I
Basically,
and I can really argue this both ways as I set it up, right? But I mean, I think the argument in favor would be to say, maybe we don't have to pay slave wages to make this work. I mean, you're talking about stuff that is intrinsically very, very heavy to and expensive to transport. Steel, all the stuff that goes into shipbuilding. So if you made steel here, and you hire American workers to make the steel, you hire American workers to truck the steel or railroad it, through intermodal transport to shipbuilding facilities. I mean, it seems to me like it could be, it could be, you wouldn't necessarily have to pay, low wages, because there's economies to be made because it's already here, right? I mean, so I don't know. I can see, I can see
It
how it could
hasn't been
work.
here for a very long time, and I don't see how economically this is going to be a viable thing.
Mhm.
You're talking about major components for a huge endeavor. Yeah, I get
Yeah.
that we could conceivably do it here. I don't think it would be to the company, whoever's manufacturing it, it's not going to be to their benefit, because really, how much are they going to get back as far as their investment is concerned?
It
You
does feel
know,
very 20th century, right? It's like,
it,
instead of like going with the way things are and adapting to that, it's like,
yeah,
let's go back to the way things were.
Ted, look at China right now, right? China is no longer the big boy when it comes to the clothing, the industrial industries. That's happening now. That's going to Mexico right now. It's cheaper to produce those goods there. So, and then on top of that, China has a huge problem that there's not going to be enough of a population to fund the retirements of the elderly in that country. you know, Everybody went through World War II. And if we look at just the population segments of the elderly, you would need 2 to 3 more times population in order to fund that pension scheme
Hmm.
going forward, and they just don't have it. Real estate, another area in China that just can't be supported by the numbers out there right now. We see a little of that here, but I'm not sure. To me, this is just sounding a little bit more like a gimmick, another Trump gimmick. This doesn't. I don't care what you think of the guy. I think you got to have ideas, of course, but I think these are not the ones that will carry us in to the next century, which is what I
Here's
believe that he should be doing.